On a night of torrential rain, when the door of the late-night diner swung open, Aisha Thompson looked up and saw a white man step inside, carrying a secret that would shatter her world. The moment his wallet opened, a photo fell to the floor, revealing the face of her mother, Grace Thompson, an ordinary black woman who had raised her alone in the tough neighborhoods. Why was her mother's picture in the hands of a mysterious billionaire, a man who seemed to hold the entire city in the palm of his hand? This secret made Aisha tremble and pulled her into a journey to confront a buried past where the truth might cost more than blood. The late-night diner on a deserted Atlanta street shuddered with the sound of rain hammering against the window panes. Aisha Thompson, 28, stood behind the counter, wiping away a coffee stain on the faded granite surface. Tonight dragged so slowly that she could hear every tick of the wall clock. The graveyard shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. always left her drained, but the meager tips kept her and her college dreams alive. Her dark brown eyes scanned the fogged window where the streetlight flickered through the rain. Just one more hour, she told herself, pushing away her fatigue. The doorbell jingled, cutting through the silence. Aisha looked up, ready to flash her polite smile for a trucker or a late-night regular. But the man who stepped in didn't belong here. A tall and imposing white man in his early 50s, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit, crossed the threshold with a commanding presence. The diner's dim light gleamed off his polished leather shoes, and how he surveyed the room slow and calculating made Aisha feel like he was appraising the entire world. He chose a booth near the window, sat down and stared into the darkness as if waiting for something. Aisha took a breath, adjusted her apron and walked over. "Good evening, sir. What can I get for you?" Her voice was gentle and professional, though unease prickled beneath her skin. The man didn't glance at the menu. "Black coffee," he said, voice low and firm, eyes still fixed on the rainy street. Aisha nodded, scribbled down the order, and returned to the counter. When she brought the cup of coffee over, he gave only the slightest nod. "No, thank you." She was used to cold customers, but something about him was different, a detachment beyond aloofness, as though a heavy secret burdened him. When she set the check on the table, he pulled out a wallet, an expensive black leather engraved with monogrammed initials. Aisha turned to leave, but then a small item dropped to the floor, spinning before it came to a rest. A photograph. She bent to pick it up, intending to return it, but her heart froze when her eyes landed on the image. The face in the picture was her mother, Grace Thompson. The gentle smile, warm eyes, and soft curls were unmistakable. The photo looked exactly like what her mother had kept in her memory box, which Grace always said was the happiest moment of her life. Aisha clutched the photo, breath quickening. This photo. Where did it come from? Her voice shook, nearly a whisper. The man looked up, icy blue eyes locking onto hers. For the first time he saw her, and in that instant, Aisha felt exposed, as if he could see straight through her. "Return it," he said, voice cold as steel. But Aisha didn't move. She turned the photo toward him, her hands trembling. "This is my mother, Grace Thompson." "Why do you have it?" His eyes flickered with something shock, fear, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "You're mistaken," he said, reaching for the photo. His fingers brushed hers, ice cold, making her flinch. He tucked the picture back into his wallet, placed a $100 bill on the table, and stood up. "Keep the change," he said, then walked to the door without looking back. Aisha stood frozen, mind spinning. "Wait!" she shouted, stumbling out from behind the counter, nearly knocking over a tray. Rain lashed her face as she burst onto the sidewalk, just as a sleek black Rolls-Royce idled at the curb. The driver opened the door for the man, but Aisha cried out, "You knew my mother. Tell me the truth." The man stopped, his hand on the door. He turned, his stare cutting through the rain. "Forget this," he said flatly. Then he slid into the car. The door slammed shut, and the car vanished into the night. Aisha stood in the rain, breathing hard. Grace Thompson. Her mother had been a simple black woman working her whole life at a sewing shop to raise her. She had never mentioned a wealthy man without ties to the upper crust. So why was her photo in the wallet of a man powerful enough to buy the city? Aisha clenched her fists, rain streaming down her face. She didn't know who he was, but swore she would find out. This secret wasn't just a photograph, it was the key to her mother's past, and maybe to her future. Under the dim lights of the late-night diner, the mysterious man sat still, yet every gesture he made seemed to emit waves of power, causing Aisha Thompson to feel the space around her shrink. He was William Harris, a white billionaire with a real estate empire across Atlanta. But what made him carry a photo of her mother, Grace Thompson, a simple black woman? When his piercing gaze met hers, Aisha realized that this man was not just a stranger. He was the key to unlocking the past her mother had buried. And in that moment, she knew she couldn't let him leave without answers. The rain continued to fall steadily outside the glass windows, the pitter-patter blending with Aisha's heavy breathing. She stood behind the counter, still clutching the $100 bill the man had left, but her mind was consumed by the photo she had just seen her mother's face, Grace with the smile she had etched into her heart. Aisha took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, and glanced toward the man, William Harris, as she would soon discover. He sat at the table near the window, back straight, holding a cup of black coffee, but not drinking. The dim fluorescent light highlighted his sharp features, high nose, square jaw, and icy blue eyes that seemed capable of seeing through every secret. William Harris was unlike any customer who had ever visited this diner. His black suit was undoubtedly more expensive than Aisha's beat-up car, and the sparkling watch on his wrist reflected light with every subtle movement. But what caught Aisha's attention wasn't his wealth. Atlanta was full of rich people, but how he occupied space. He didn't just take up space. He seemed to own it, as if this diner, this street, this entire city belonged to him. He slowly turned his head, his gaze sweeping over Aisha, and for a moment she felt frozen. It wasn't fear, but a sense that this man knew something she wasn't ready to face. Aisha forced herself to approach his table, carrying the coffee pot to mask her unease. "Refill, sir?" she asked, her voice striving for normalcy. He shook his head slightly, saying nothing, but his fingers unconsciously touched an old silver ring on his left hand, a piece that seemed out of place amid his opulence. The ring was worn with faded floral engravings, as if it had been worn for decades. Aisha briefly thought someone like him wouldn't wear cheap jewelry, so why keep this? She turned away, but the image of the ring lingered like a clue she couldn't yet decipher. When she returned to the counter, William stood up, pulling out his wallet to pay. Aisha observed him trying to memorize every detail, how he adjusted his coat and looked toward the door, as if calculating something. At that moment, his wallet opened, and a photo fell to the floor, spinning slightly before coming to rest. Aisha bent down to pick it up, her heart pounding. Her mother's face appeared clearly, Grace Thompson, with her gentle smile and eyes bright like a small flame. This photo was identical to the one her mother kept in an old wooden box, which Grace used to look at with unspoken sadness. "Where did this photo come from?" Aisha asked, her voice trembling but determined. She clutched the photo tightly, as if afraid it would disappear. William looked up, his eyes sharp as knives. "Return it," he said, his voice deep and authoritative. Aisha didn't move. She turned the photo toward him, her hand slightly shaking. "This is my mother, Grace Thompson. You know her. Why do you have it?" Her words echoed in the silent space like an undeniable accusation. William stared at her, and for the first time, Aisha saw a flicker of emotion cross his face. Not anger, but caution, as if she had touched an old wound. But a second later, he regained his composure. "You're mistaken," he said, reaching for the photo. His fingers brushed hers, cold, making her flinch. He returned the photo to his wallet, placed a $100 bill on the table, and walked to the door. "Keep the change," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. Aisha stood frozen, her breath heavy. "Wait!" she shouted, rushing out from behind the counter, nearly knocking over the coffee pot. Rain lashed her face as she ran to the sidewalk, where a sleek black Rolls-Royce waited. The driver opened the door for William, but Aisha yelled, "You know my mother. Tell me, why do you have her photo?" William paused, his hand on the door handle. He turned back, his gaze cutting through the rain, cold as a blade. "Forget this," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Then he slid into the car. The door slammed shut, and the vehicle sped into the darkness. Aisha stood in the rainwater, soaking her coat. Grace Thompson. Her mother had never mentioned a man like this. She only spoke of hard days in the black neighborhoods of southern Atlanta, where she worked her whole life to raise Aisha. But that photo and the old silver ring were proof that there was something her mother had hidden. William Harris wasn't just a random billionaire. He knew her mother, and Aisha vowed to uncover the truth, even if it meant confronting his entire empire. Aisha Thompson stood frozen under the torrential rain, her eyes blazing as she faced William Harris, the mysterious man holding secrets about her mother. The image of Grace Thompson, the black mother who had sacrificed her life to raise her, haunted Aisha's mind. Why would a white billionaire with a real estate empire dominating Atlanta carry her mother's photo? When Aisha cornered William with sharp questions, his vague statement sent chills down her spine. A small clue, but enough for her to vow to delve deeper into the truth, even if it meant confronting his power. Rain poured down as if trying to drown the deserted street in Atlanta, soaking Aisha Thompson's coat. She stood at the counter of the late-night diner, still clutching the $100 bill William Harris had left. But her mind was consumed by the photo she had just seen her mother's face. Grace, with the gentle smile she thought belonged only to private memories. William, the white man, who had entered the diner with the aura of a ruler, now sat by the window, his icy blue eyes fixed on the rain. But Aisha couldn't let him remain silent. Not after she saw that photo, proof that he knew her mother and was hiding a secret her mother had never revealed. Aisha took a deep breath, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked to William's table. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to keep her voice calm. "Do you need anything else?" she asked, though both knew she wasn't there to serve. William looked up, his gaze sharp as a blade. "No," he said, his voice deep and authoritative. He took a sip of coffee, but Aisha noticed his hand slightly tightened around the cup, a small sign of tension. She decided to press on. "I'm not mistaken," Aisha said, her voice low but firm. She crossed her arms, her eyes locked onto his. "The photo in your wallet is of my mother, Grace Thompson. I know because she has an identical one kept in a keepsake box. You know her. Tell me, why do you have it?" Her words echoed in the silent space like an unwithdrawable challenge. The diner seemed to shrink, leaving only her and this powerful man facing off under the dim light. William slowly placed his coffee cup down, but his eyes never left Aisha. She saw a flicker of emotion cross his face, not fear, but caution, as if she had touched a secret he had buried deep. "You're mistaken," he repeated, his voice cold as steel. But this time Aisha wouldn't let him evade. She stepped closer, her voice rising above the rain outside. "Don't lie. I saw it. My mother didn't know anyone like you." "She worked." Aisha Thompson stepped into her small apartment, her coat still soaked from the confrontation with William Harris, the mysterious man with a photo of her mother. His cryptic words, "Grace, she was once part of my life," echoed in her mind like a door cracked open to a past her mother, Grace Thompson, had locked away. In the silence of the room, memories of her mother guided Aisha back to a time when Grace faced love and prejudice, revealing why she had chosen to walk away from the white man who once held her heart. With the fire of determination burning, Aisha searched for her mother's keepsakes, vowing to uncover the truth behind the photograph, even if the price was everything she knew. The rain had stopped, leaving glistening puddles across the streets of Atlanta. Aisha pushed open the door to the small apartment in the Southern District, where she and her mother had weathered countless hard years. The space remained unchanged. The old wooden floor carried its familiar scent. The faded floral curtains swayed gently, and the framed photograph of Grace on the table smiled gently, as if trying to soothe her. But tonight, that smile could not calm the storm inside Aisha. She pulled off her wet coat, tossed it onto a chair, and sat down. Her mind swirling with the image of William Harris, the white billionaire with an icy gaze, and those haunting words, "Grace, she was once part of my life." Aisha closed her eyes, trying to piece the puzzle together. Grace Thompson. Her mother was a strong black woman who had worked in a sewing shop her whole life to raise Aisha. She had never mentioned a man like William, wealthy, powerful, from a world far removed from the poor neighborhoods they called home. But the photograph in William's wallet and the old silver ring he wore were undeniable evidence that there was a story her mother had never told. Aisha opened her eyes. Moonlight streamed through the window and fell upon Grace's photo memories, returned like scenes from an old film. Flashback. Atlanta, 1980s. Grace, barely in her 20s, stood under the moonlight in a small park, facing a white man with a warm smile. He wore a simple shirt, not an expensive suit, but he looked at Grace as if she were his entire world. "We'll get through this, Grace," he said, holding her hand. But Grace shook her head, her eyes brimming with tears. "You don't understand, Will. Your family will never accept me, a black girl from the projects. Society won't allow it." The man, likely a young William Harris, tightened his grip. "I don't care what they think. I love you." But Grace pulled her hand away, her voice trembling. "I don't want you to lose everything, and I can't live under their scorn." That night, Grace walked away carrying a broken heart and a secret she would keep forever. Aisha's eyes snapped open, her breathing shallow. These weren't her memories. They were the stories Grace whispered on sleepless nights, thinking Aisha had already drifted off. Grace had only ever spoken of a love that couldn't be, and the brutal racial prejudice of the 1980s, when love between a black woman and a white man was taboo. She had never said his name, but now Aisha was sure it was William Harris. That old silver ring he wore, the photo he kept, everything pointed to her mother. But why had Grace chosen to walk away? And why had she never told Aisha about him? Aisha stood up and walked to the corner of the room, where her mother's keepsake box sat, a worn wooden chest, carved with simple floral designs. She knelt, opened the lid, and was immediately surrounded by the scent of old paper and Grace's signature jasmine perfume. Inside were faded letters, pictures of Grace in her youth, and the same photo William had kept Grace smiling in the sunlight, youthful and radiant. Aisha clutched the photo, tears welling. "Why didn't you tell me, Mama?" she whispered. She kept searching, hoping for more clues. Her fingers touched a small leather notebook. Its cover was worn, tied with a silk ribbon. Aisha opened it, heart pounding. On the first page, Grace's slanted handwriting read, "For Aisha, when you are ready." She turned the next page and read, "His name was Will. He loved me, but the world wouldn't let us be together. I left to protect him, and you, if you existed. Forgive me for hiding the truth." Aisha froze, her hands trembling. Will? Could it be William Harris? And if you existed, what did that mean? Was Grace already pregnant with Aisha when she left? She closed the notebook, her mind spinning. William wasn't just an old lover. He might be her father, a possibility that shook her. Grace had sacrificed her love to protect him from social ruin and to protect Aisha from a world that wouldn't accept them. But what had William done to find Grace? Why did he keep the photo yet live in opulence while her mother struggled all her life? Aisha rose, gripping the notebook. She looked out the window, where the moonlight still bathed the city of Atlanta. William Harris might think he had escaped her, but he was wrong. She would find him, confront him, and demand answers, not just because of the photograph, but for Grace, for the years her mother suffered in silence, for the love she buried, and for the truth Aisha deserved to know. Aisha Thompson sat in her small apartment, the glow of her laptop screen illuminating her face, where the fire of determination still burned. Her mother's notebook. Grace Thompson's revealed a painful truth. A man named Will. Possibly. William Harris, the powerful white billionaire, had once been the love of her mother's life, perhaps even her father. But the truth remained elusive, like a ghost drifting through the Atlanta mist. As Aisha dug into the digital world to track down William, she discovered he was an untouchable man, a real estate tycoon who had buried his past beneath concrete and glass. With no trace linking him to Grace, Aisha faced a wall of power, but she swore she would break through it, even if it meant walking straight into William's stronghold. Aisha's apartment was cloaked in darkness, with only the blue glow from her laptop casting light on Grace's photograph on the table. It was almost 3 a.m., but Aisha couldn't sleep. Her mother's leather-bound notebook lay on the desk, the inscription, "For Aisha when you're ready," and the confession about Will, engraved deeply in her mind. He loved me, but the world wouldn't let us be together, Grace had written. Aisha clenched her fists, fury and grief intertwining. Grace, a resilient black woman, had sacrificed love to protect Aisha, and the man, possibly William Harris, the man Aisha had confronted at the diner the night before. But why did he carry her mother's photo? And why had Grace hidden him from her? Aisha opened her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She typed, "William Harris, Atlanta," into the search bar, determined to unravel the past. The results popped up instantly. William Harris, 52 years old, CEO of Harris Enterprises, a real estate empire with dozens of skyscrapers in Atlanta and beyond. His image appeared, sharp features, cold eyes, the same man from the diner. Articles hailed him as the architect of modern Atlanta, with billion-dollar projects. But not a single mention of Grace Thompson or any relationship from the past. She clicked on the Harris Enterprises website. Sleek design, glossy images of glass towers, and a short biography of William, pioneer leader and icon of success. No personal details, no wife, no children, no history. Aisha frowned, feeling like she was chasing a ghost. She searched William Harris, Grace Thompson, but the results were unrelated articles. She changed tactics, searching William Harris, Atlanta, 1980s, hoping to catch traces from when Grace was young. A few old articles surfaced referencing William as the young heir of the Harris family, but nothing more. The Harris family, she noted, was a wealthy white dynasty known for their conservatism and influence. Hours passed, her eyes burning, but Aisha refused to give up. She turned to social media, combing through public posts about William. A few photos from charity events, galas, or grand openings appeared, but he was always alone, his eyes distant. She zoomed in on a recent photo, and her heart skipped a beat. The same worn silver ring on William's left hand, faint but visible, matching the one she had seen the night before. It didn't fit with his designer suits or luxury watches. "Why does he still wear it?" Aisha whispered, feeling like she had touched a vital puzzle piece. But the truth remained just out of reach. William Harris had seemingly erased his past, or never allowed it to surface. Aisha closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, her mind spinning. Grace. Her mother had lived her whole life in the impoverished black neighborhood of South Atlanta, enduring discrimination and working tirelessly. Meanwhile, William had built an empire and lived in opulence. Why hadn't he looked for her if he had truly loved her mother? Or had he tried only for Grace to disappear, as she wrote in the journal? "I left to protect him and to protect you." Aisha stared at the notebook, haunted by the words, "If you exist." Had Grace been pregnant when she left William? If so, William could be her father, a possibility that horrified and infuriated her. She rose, walked to the window, and looked over Atlanta's glowing city lights. William Harris lived in his world somewhere out there, one of power, distance, and invulnerability. But Aisha was not Grace. She wouldn't run or stay silent. She would confront him in the very heart of his empire. She grabbed her phone and searched for the address of Harris Enterprises, a glass tower in downtown Atlanta, a symbol of wealth and control. Going there was madness, a regular black girl uninvited, powerless, confronting a billionaire. But Aisha didn't care. The photo ring and notebook were all clues, and she deserved the truth. She put on her coat, tucked the notebook into her bag, and looked at Grace's photo one last time. "Mom, I'll find out," she whispered, "no matter what it takes." As she stepped out the door, the first light of dawn broke across the Atlanta sky, painting it a soft orange hue. Aisha took a deep breath, feeling like she was entering a battlefield. William Harris might think he had escaped her, but he was wrong. She would go to Harris Enterprises, shatter the wall of silence, and force him to face the past with Grace, with her, and with a truth he could no longer bury. Aisha Thompson stood in front of the gleaming glass tower of Harris Enterprises, her heart pounding, as she faced the empire of William Harris, the white man who might be her father, the man who held the secret of her mother, Grace Thompson. After her investigation turned up no clues, Aisha decided to slip into his stronghold, despite tight security and the social divide that separated them. In this cold world of power, an unexpected meeting with William revealed a painful truth. He had once searched for Grace, but she had disappeared to protect Aisha. Could Aisha break down William's wall of silence, or would the truth remain a ghost forever? Dawn had just broken, coloring Atlanta's sky a vivid orange, but Aisha Thompson felt a chill as she stood before the Harris Enterprises tower. The towering glass building, reflecting the sunlight like an impenetrable fortress, symbolized William Harris's power, the white billionaire she believed to be the will in her mother's notebook. That notebook with the line, "He loved me, but the world wouldn't allow it," sat in the pocket of Aisha's coat, a constant reminder of her mission. Grace Thompson. Her mother had sacrificed love to shield Aisha from racial prejudice and societal pressure. But William, with Grace's photo in his wallet and that worn silver ring, knew something Aisha needed to uncover. She took a deep breath, straightened her coat, and entered the lobby. The blast of cool air from the AC and the scent of new carpet made her feel out of place. The spacious lobby, with marble floors and a polished reception desk, belonged to people like William, wealthy, white, powerful, not to a black girl from Atlanta's poor southern neighborhoods. She stepped up to the desk where a middle-aged woman with a polite smile was typing. "I need to see Mr. William Harris," Aisha said firmly. The receptionist looked up briefly, scanning her. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Aisha admitted. But it's personal. About my mother, Grace Thompson. The woman frowned, typed something into the computer, then shook her head. Mr. Harris doesn't take walk-ins. You can leave a message. Aisha clenched her fists, feeling like she was again being pushed out of William's world. Tell him I know about the photo, she said, her voice low but sharp. The receptionist hesitated, then made a call, whispering into the receiver. After a minute, she hung up. I'm sorry, Mr. Harris is busy. You should leave. Aisha turned away, but she wasn't giving up. She scanned the lobby, employees in tailored suits, badges tapping through the security gates, and 2 guards near the elevators watching her. Going through the main entrance was impossible. Then she spotted a delivery guy pushing a cart of coffee and documents toward the gate. He looked young, distracted. Aisha moved quickly. She stepped in behind him, pretending urgency. Hey, you forgot to drop off the report for Mr. Harris, she said sharply. The guy turned, confused. What? Aisha sighed, feigning frustration. The morning report. You didn't give it to me. Before he could react, she stepped close, passing through the gate just as his badge unlocked it. The guards glanced over but didn't stop her. She was in. Aisha's heart pounded as she entered the elevator, hitting the button for the top floor where William's office surely was. In the enclosed space, she felt the full weight of the moment. She, an ordinary woman, was infiltrating a billionaire's territory. The elevator dinged. The doors opened to a sleek hallway lined with glass and bright lights. A man in a black suit stepped in front of her instantly. Who are you? Do you have an appointment? Aisha stood tall, voice steady. I'm Aisha Thompson, daughter of Grace Thompson. I need to see William Harris. Right now. The man frowned, about to call security, but a deep voice echoed from the end of the hallway. Let her in. Aisha turned. Her heart stopped. William Harris stood tall in a gray suit, those ice-blue eyes holding a glimmer, not anger, but resignation. He motioned for her to follow him into his office. The door closed behind them, sealing them in a quiet space where the only sound was the clock ticking. Aisha faced him, hand gripping the notebook in her coat. You knew my mother, Grace Thompson. You said she was once part of your life. I want the truth. William sat in a leather chair, fingers brushing the silver ring on his hand. He was silent for a moment, then spoke, his voice low. I looked for her, Aisha. After she left, I hired people to search all over Atlanta. But Grace, she was good at hiding. She disappeared to protect something or someone. He looked at her, his gaze touched with pain. I didn't know you existed. Aisha was stunned, anger flaring. You didn't know. You lived in luxury while my mother struggled her whole life. If you loved her, why did you let her go? William closed his eyes as if her words were blades. I was a coward, he said. My family threatened to cut me off if I stayed with a black woman. I could come back after securing my position. But by the time I tried, she was gone. Aisha clenched her fists, tears welling up. Grace had given up everything while William built an empire. But his words that he had searched for Grace shook her resolve. Was he telling the truth, or just making excuses? I don't believe you, she said, voice trembling. But I'll find out. She turned to leave, but William called out, Aisha, be careful. There are things you shouldn't dig into. She didn't look back. She left the office, heart pounding. William Harris had given her one puzzle piece, but the truth was still unfinished. She would keep going. For Grace. For herself. Aisha Thompson returned to her small apartment, carrying with her the painful confession of William Harris. This powerful white man had once searched for her mother, Grace Thompson, but failed because she had chosen to disappear to protect her. His words, "I didn't know you existed," echoed in Aisha's mind, tearing her between anger and sorrow. As the daughter of a strong black woman, Aisha had grown up with the memories of her mother's sacrifices, but now she faced the possibility that William might be her father. In the stillness of the night, she searched through Grace's keepsakes, hoping to find answers, but every new clue only weighed heavier on her heart. Should she forgive this man, or bury the past? Her mother had tried to lock away forever. Aisha's apartment was cloaked in darkness, save for a small desk lamp casting light onto a photograph of Grace Thompson on the wall. It was nearly midnight, but Aisha couldn't sleep. She sat on the floor, her mother's leather-bound journal open before her, the words, "For Aisha, when you're ready," whispering to her from the past. The unexpected meeting with William Harris at Harris Enterprises just hours earlier still haunted her. He had said he had searched for Grace, that she had disappeared to protect someone, and that he hadn't known Aisha existed. His confession left her torn, but also stirred up a storm of anger. If William had loved her mother, why had he let her suffer alone? And if he was her father, as the journal suggested, why hadn't he tried harder? Aisha clutched her head, trying to piece together the fragments. Grace, her mother, had been a strong black woman, working tirelessly at a sewing shop to raise her in the poor neighborhoods of South Atlanta. She had often spoken of the 1980s, when racial segregation still loomed like a shadow over every street corner. Grace had never mentioned William Harris, only referring to a love that could never be with a white man. But the photograph in William's wallet, the silver ring he wore, and the name Will in the journal all pointed to him. Aisha wondered, had Grace hidden him to protect her from a world that wouldn't accept a biracial child? Or had she done it to protect her own heart? She got up and walked to the corner of the room where Grace's keepsake box was stored. The old wooden box, carved with simple patterns, held her mother's cherished memories. Aisha knelt and lifted the lid, and the scent of aged paper mixed with jasmine perfume spilled out, as if Grace were still there. She sifted through faded letters, old photographs of a young Grace, and the same picture William carried Grace, smiling in the sunlight, young and radiant. Then her fingers touched a small object wrapped in silk, a delicate silver necklace with a pendant engraved with 3 words, "Forgive, love, begin." Aisha froze, heart pounding. She unwrapped the silk and found a folded slip of paper inside Grace's handwriting, trembling across the page. "Aisha, this is a gift Will gave me. I kept it to remind myself that love is never wrong, only the world is. If you find him, decide with your heart. I love you." Tears rolled down Aisha's cheeks, falling onto the paper. The necklace was irrefutable proof. William Harris had not only been Grace's lover, he was the man she had loved deeply enough to keep this gift through decades. But the engraved words, "Forgive, love, begin," tore at Aisha's heart. Forgive whom? William for abandoning her mother, or Grace for hiding the truth? She put on the necklace, feeling its lightweight rest against her chest. In her mind, memories of her mother flooded back, nights when Grace sat by the window, eyes red but still smiling at her. Times she whispered, "You are my whole world," as they struggled to pay the rent. Grace had sacrificed everything from love to dreams to protect her. But if William was truly her father, where had he been when her mother wept? He had built the Harris Enterprises empire and lived in luxury, while Grace had worked herself to exhaustion. Aisha clenched the pendant, fury surging inside her. "Mama deserved better," she whispered. But William's words at the office echoed too. "I was a coward. By the time I tried, she was already gone." Had he searched for Grace? Or were those just words meant to soothe his guilt? Aisha looked at the journal again. The phrase, "if you exist," still haunting her. If Grace had been pregnant when she left William, she had chosen to hide it to protect Aisha from the Harris family, a rich, conservative white lineage, as Aisha had read online. The racism of the 1980s would never have accepted a biracial child, and Grace had known that. But did that mean Aisha had to forgive William? Or should she close the door on the past, as her mother once did? Aisha stood up and wiped away her tears. She couldn't stop now. The necklace and the note were new clues, but they weren't enough. She needed the whole truth, not just about the love between Grace and William, but about William's role in her life. She tucked the note into her pocket, resolving to confront William again. But this time, she would bring the necklace proof he couldn't deny. She looked out the window at the flickering lights of Atlanta. Harris Enterprises, with its cold glass tower, was waiting for her. William might be her father, but he was also the man who let her mother endure alone. She would make him answer, even if she had to shatter his entire world. Aisha Thompson stood in front of the glass tower of Harris Enterprises, the silver necklace engraved with the words, "Forgive Love," begin cold in her hand. A gift from William Harris to her mother, Grace Thompson, was undeniable proof of the love they once shared, and possibly the paternal link between Aisha and this powerful white man. After learning he had once searched for Grace but failed, Aisha confronted William again, bringing the necklace to force him to speak the truth. A painful revelation about family pressure shakes Aisha to the core inside his sterile, imposing office. Yet her heart still wavers. Can she forgive the man who abandoned her mother? Or will the truth remain an unhealed wound? Morning sunlight reflected off Atlanta's skyscrapers, dancing on the glass facade of Harris Enterprises. Aisha Thompson stood on the sidewalk, fingers clenched around the silver necklace, the gift William Harris had given her mother Grace, engraved with the words, "Forgive Love, begin." The accompanying note, written in Grace's trembling hand, echoed in her mind. "If you find him, let your heart decide." But Aisha's heart was anything but calm. William, the white billionaire with a vast real estate empire, had admitted he once loved Grace and had searched for her after she vanished. But if he was her father, as her mother's journal implied, why hadn't he done more to protect Grace from a lifetime of suffering? Aisha took a deep breath and fastened the necklace around her neck, feeling its light weight as a reminder of her mission. She walked into the main lobby of Harris Enterprises, no longer sneaking in as she had before. The lobby was still as cold as ever, with marble floors and the sterile air of power, a world not meant for her. A black woman from the poor neighborhoods of South Atlanta. At the front desk, she locked eyes with the middle-aged receptionist. "I need to see William Harris. Tell him Aisha Thompson, Grace Thompson's daughter, is here, and I have something he needs to see." Her voice was firm, leaving no room for denial. The receptionist hesitated, her gaze flicking to the gleaming necklace around Aisha's neck. After a brief call, she nodded. "Mr. Harris will see you. Top floor." Aisha stepped into the elevator, her heart pounding. She was no longer the frightened girl sneaking past security. She carried evidence, the necklace, and the truth Grace had left behind. When the elevator chimed and the doors slid open, she stepped into the sleek hallway standing by the office door, where William was already waiting. His icy blue eyes locked onto hers, but there was something else this time, not resignation, but pain. "Aisha," he said quietly, gesturing for her to come in. The expansive office, with its panoramic view of Atlanta, radiated authority. William sat down in a leather chair, his fingers instinctively touching the worn silver ring, the same ring Aisha now knew was tied to her mother. She didn't wait for him to speak. "This was your gift to my mother," she said, removing the necklace and placing it on the desk, its pendant gleaming under the light. "Grace kept it her entire life. She said you loved her, but the world wouldn't allow it. I want to know the truth. All of it. William looked at the necklace, his face flickering with emotion. He touched the pendant, his fingers brushing over the words. Forgive, love, begin. She kept it, he whispered almost to himself. Then he looked up, meeting Aisha's gaze. I gave Grace that necklace the night I begged her to stay. But my family. He paused, his voice catching. They were a wealthy, conservative, white family, full of prejudice. They told me that if I married a black woman, I'd lose everything, my inheritance, my reputation, my future. I was young, foolish, and I was afraid. Aisha clenched her fists, anger rising. So you chose wealth over my mother. You let her suffer alone while you built this empire. William closed his eyes as if her words were blades. I thought I could return when strong enough to fight them. But when I finally tried to find Grace, she was gone. I hired investigators and searched Atlanta, but she left no trail. I didn't know she was pregnant. I didn't know about you, Aisha. His words filled the room with heavy silence. Aisha's chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to accuse him, but part of her faltered. She remembered Grace's words. I left to protect him, and to protect you. Grace had chosen to disappear to shield Aisha from the Harris family, from a world in the 1980s that would never accept a biracial child. But the pain still lingered. My mother worked herself to death, Aisha said, her voice trembling. She cried on nights I didn't see. If you loved her, why didn't you try harder? William opened his eyes, regret shadowing his face. I did try, but not enough. And I live with that guilt every day. The photo of Grace in my wallet, this ring, all I have left of her. He paused, staring at the necklace on the table. She wanted you to forgive, not just me, but the world that tore us apart. Aisha shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I don't know if I can forgive. Not when my mother suffered her whole life because of your choices. She stood, pointing to the necklace. Keep it if you truly feel regret. But don't expect me to call you father. Not yet. She turned to leave, but William called after her. Aisha, I'll tell you if you want to know more. Everything I know. She paused, her hand on the doorknob, but didn't look back. I'll find the truth myself, she said, then left the necklace glimmering on the table. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Aisha leaned against the wall, her breath shaky. William was no longer a distant shadow. He was a man burdened by guilt, and the man her mother had once loved. She touched the spot where the necklace had rested on her chest, feeling its absence. Grace wanted her to forgive, but her heart wasn't ready. Still, she would go on for her mother and herself. Aisha Thompson sat in her small apartment, the dim desk light casting a faint glow over the letter she had just found in her mother Grace Thompson's memory box. After the tense confrontation with William Harris, the powerful white man who admitted to once loving and searching for Grace, Aisha now faced the possibility that he was her father. The letter, written in Grace's trembling handwriting, confirmed the painful truth: William was indeed her father. But Grace had hidden the truth to protect Aisha from a world of prejudice. Torn between the pain of her mother's sacrifice and William's regret, Aisha reflected on Grace's memory, searching for an answer to the heaviest question. Should she open her heart to forgiveness or bury the past her mother had spent a lifetime protecting? Darkness filled Aisha Thompson's apartment, with only the soft glow of a desk lamp illuminating Grace's old wooden memory box. It was late, but Aisha couldn't sleep. That morning's confrontation at Harris Enterprises still haunted her. William Harris, the white billionaire with guilt in his eyes, had admitted he left Grace due to pressure from his conservative family, but tried to find her after she disappeared. His words, "I didn't know you existed," and the silver necklace engraved with "Forgive, Love, Begin" left behind on his desk still echoed in her mind. If William was her father, as Grace's note suggested, what was Aisha supposed to do with that truth? Aisha opened the box, her fingers brushing over faded letters and old photographs. The smell of aged paper mixed with Grace's familiar jasmine perfume brought tears to her eyes. She had already found the necklace, a symbol of Grace and William's love, but her instincts told her there was more her mother had left behind. Digging deeper under layers of silk, she uncovered a thin envelope sealed with cracked red wax. Grace's handwriting on the front read, "For Aisha, when you know the truth." Aisha's heart pounded. She opened the envelope and unfolded the carefully creased letter. "Aisha, my beloved daughter." The letter began, the handwriting shaky, as if written through tears. "If you read this, you found Will your father. He was the great love of my life, but the world in the 1980s didn't allow a black woman like me to be with a white man like him. His family threatened to disown him, and I didn't want him to lose everything. When I learned I was pregnant with you, I left Atlanta to protect you from prejudice, from the cruel stares of society. I hid him from you because I wanted you to grow up with love, not hate. Forgive me, Aisha, and if you meet him, give him a chance. He didn't know about you, but I believe he loved us both." Aisha dropped the letter, tears falling onto the paper. The truth sat on her chest like a stone. William Harris was her father. Grace had not only sacrificed her love, but had taken Aisha far away to protect her from the Harris family, a wealthy white lineage steeped in prejudice, just as William had described. Aisha remembered the night Grace sat by the window, her eyes red, but always smiling at her. "You are my whole world," Grace used to say. Now Aisha understood every tear her mother shed was the cost of keeping that love hidden for both her and William. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the blinking lights of Atlanta. Memories of Grace flooded her mind. The days they walked through the poor neighborhoods of the South Side, the laughter amid car horns, the nights Grace worked overtime at the sewing shop to buy her books. Grace had lived her entire life for her daughter, never once blaming William. The letter and necklace proved it. Her mother believed in forgiveness, love, and starting over. But could Aisha do the same? William had lived in luxury while her mother struggled. He said he regretted it, but was that enough to erase the years Grace suffered? She touched her neck where the necklace had once hung and remembered William's words. "She wanted you to forgive. The world that tore us apart." He wasn't the cold man she had once believed. He carried a photo of Grace wore the silver ring and searched for her, even if in vain. But he had still chosen power over love, leaving her mother alone. Aisha clutched the letter, torn between anger and a new fragile empathy. If Grace believed William deserved forgiveness, did Aisha owe him a chance? She returned to the memory box, hoping for more clues to guide her. But the letter had said everything Grace wanted her to choose with her heart. Aisha sat down and held the letter to her chest. She wasn't ready to call William father, but she couldn't bury the past either. She needed to see him again, not to accuse, but to understand, to learn how much her mother had loved him and whether he truly felt remorse. She looked at Grace's photo on the table, her gentle smile seeming to offer encouragement. "Mom, I'll try," she whispered. "For you." Aisha stood up and slipped the letter into her bag. Harris Enterprises, with its cold glass tower, was waiting. This time she would bring the letter not as a weapon, but as a bridge to the final truth. William Harris might be her father, but he would have to prove he was worthy of Grace's love and hers. As she stepped out the door, the warm Atlanta sunrise bathed the sky in light, as if Grace was watching over her. Aisha Thompson stepped into the glass tower of Harris Enterprises, the letter from her mother, Grace Thompson, weighing heavily in her coat pocket. The letter confirmed that William Harris, a powerful white billionaire, was her father, a truth that tore her heart between pain and hope. After learning that Grace left William to protect her from societal prejudice, Aisha finally confronted him carrying the letter to demand answers. In his cold office, William revealed why he kept Grace's photo and his efforts to find her, momentarily stirring sympathy in Aisha. But the shadow of the past kept her distant, leaving a lingering question. Could she ever forgive a father who never knew she existed? The Atlanta sunset lit the sky crimson, reflecting off the glass exterior of Harris Enterprises. Aisha Thompson stood at the foot of the tower, her fingers clenched around Grace's letter inside her coat. The letter, its trembling handwriting, had confirmed both what she feared and what she had quietly longed for. William Harris was her father. "He is your father," Grace had written. "But I hid that from him to protect you." Aisha inhaled deeply, feeling the lingering cold of the silver necklace, even though she had left it with William, as if it still rested on her skin. She was no longer a lost girl in this world of power. She carried her mother's truth. Today, she would make William face it. She entered the grand lobby. The marble floors and sterile white lighting no longer made her hesitate. At the front desk, she met the familiar gaze of the receptionist. "I'm Aisha Thompson. Tell William Harris I have a letter from Grace Thompson. He'll want to see me." Her voice was sharp, leaving no room for denial. Recognizing her resolve, the receptionist immediately picked up the phone. After a brief conversation, she nodded. Top floor. Aisha entered the elevator, her heart pounding but steady. The letter was her weapon, and a bridge to the past her mother left behind. The elevator chimed, doors sliding open onto a sleek hallway. William stood at the door to his office, tall in a gray suit, his icy blue eyes now carrying something softer. Hope, perhaps, or fear. "Aisha," he said in a low voice, motioning her in. The office was expansive, with a window overlooking the glittering lights of Atlanta, but the air was as heavy as a storm. On his desk lay the silver necklace engraved with "Forgive, Love." Begin a quiet reminder of their previous encounter. Aisha didn't sit. She pulled the letter from her pocket and placed it on the desk. Grace's handwriting was visible beneath the lamp's glow. "My mother wrote this letter to me," she said, voice steady but slightly tremored. "She said you're my father. She left you to protect me from your family, from a world that wouldn't accept a mixed-race child. I want to hear from you. Why did you keep my mother's photo? And what did you do to find her?" William looked at the letter, his hand trembling slightly as he touched the envelope. He opened it, skimmed the words, and his face contorted briefly as if struck. "Grace," he murmured, then looked up, pain filling his gaze. "I kept her picture because she was the one thing I couldn't let go of. Every day I looked at it to remind myself that I lost the most precious thing I ever had because I was a coward." He paused, his fingers brushing the silver ring on his hand. "I did look for her, Aisha. After she left, I hired private investigators and searched through every neighborhood in Atlanta. But Grace was good at disappearing. She didn't want to be found." Aisha clenched her fists, fury rising. "My mother struggled her whole life while you lived in luxury. If you loved her, why didn't you try harder?" William closed his eyes, his voice breaking. "I did try, but it wasn't enough. My family didn't just threaten to disinherit me. They vowed to destroy her. They called her unworthy. I thought if I built power, I could protect her. But by the time I was ready, she was gone. I didn't know she was pregnant. If I had known about you, I wouldn't have stopped." His words hung in the silent room like a confession. Aisha's chest tightened. She remembered Grace's letter. "I believe he loves us." William wasn't just a man who had left. He was someone torn by shame and guilt. She glanced at the photo of Grace now placed beside the letter, and something new crept in: empathy. But it didn't erase the hurt. "My mother cried at night when I couldn't see her," Aisha said, her voice unsteady. She gave up everything. Do you know how much pain she lived through? William opened his eyes, and they were red. I do, and I live with that guilt every day. The photo, the ring, they're my way of keeping her close. When I saw you at that diner, I saw her in you, not just in your face, but in your strength. He paused, lowering his voice. Aisha, I don't expect you to call me Dad. But if you'll let me, I'd like to try not to redeem myself, but to honor Grace. Aisha shook her head, tears spilling. I don't know if I can. Not when my mother suffered because of you. She pointed to the letter. She wanted me to forgive, but I need time. She turned to leave, but William called out, Aisha, whenever you're ready, I'll be here. Not as a billionaire. Just a man who lost everything because of his mistakes. She paused at the door hand on the knob, but didn't respond. She entered the elevator, breath shaky, the letter still clutched in her hand. As the doors closed, Aisha looked out at the radiant lights of Atlanta. William was her father, but he was also the man who let Grace endure alone. She touched the hollow at her neck, where the necklace once rested, remembering Grace's words. Decide with your heart. She wasn't ready to forgive, but a door had cracked open. She would go on not just for Grace, but for herself. Aisha Thompson sat in her small apartment, the dim light casting soft shadows over the letter and mementos of her mother, Grace Thompson, who had sacrificed her entire life to protect her from a world filled with prejudice. After confronting William Harris, the powerful white billionaire, who confirmed he was her father, and hearing him speak of his regret over losing Grace, Aisha stood at the most significant crossroads of her life, to accept him as her father, or to bury the past. Her mother had tried so hard to keep hidden. A final journal entry from Grace, discovered in the bottom of her keepsake box, carried a message of forgiveness and love that forced Aisha to look deep into her heart. Could she move beyond the pain to begin again? Or would she choose the independent path Grace had raised her to walk? Aisha Thompson's apartment was cloaked in darkness, lit only by the faint glow of a desk lamp, illuminating Grace's letter beside a framed photo of her mother smiling gently. It was late at night, but Aisha couldn't sleep. The confrontation with William Harris that afternoon at Harris Enterprises still haunted her. He had admitted he was her father, shared his efforts to find Grace, and explained why he had kept her photo, a confession full of remorse that couldn't erase the years of hardship her mother had endured. Whenever you're ready, I'll be here, William had said. But Aisha had left her heart torn between anger and a flicker of empathy. Grace's letter. Forgive me. Give him a chance. Was the breeze nudging her toward this fork in the road? Aisha clutched her head as memories of Grace flooded back. Grace, a strong black woman, had worked tirelessly at a tailor shop in a poor neighborhood in South Atlanta, enduring racial discrimination to raise her. She had never spoken of William, only of a love that could never be severed by the prejudice of the 1980s. But the letter, the engraved necklace reading, "Forgive, love, begin," and the photo in William's wallet confirmed it. He was her father, the man Grace had loved and sacrificed everything to protect. Aisha wondered, was forgiving William a way to honor her mother, or would it betray the tears Grace had hidden? She stood and walked over to Grace's wooden keepsake box, where the final pieces of her mother's story were stored. She had found the letter and the necklace, but something in her gut said there was more. Aisha opened the lid, and the scent of old paper and jasmine perfume wafted out, as if Grace was still present. She sifted through faded letters and old photos until her fingers brushed against a thin fabric-bound journal hidden at the bottom. Her heart raced. She opened it, and the final page, written in Grace's familiar slanted script, stunned her. Aisha, you are the light of my life. Grace wrote the entry just a month before her death. I never regretted leaving Will. I chose you, the purest form of love. But I never hated him. He loved me, even if his mistakes pulled us apart. If you find him, don't let my pain stop you. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's how you set yourself free. Love begin, as I always wished for you. Tears streamed down Aisha's face, falling onto the page. Grace hadn't just hidden William to protect her. She had left this message behind, as a torch to light Aisha's way forward. Clutching the journal to her chest, memories of her mother overwhelmed her. She recalled evenings when Grace taught her how to sew smiling, despite her calloused hands, nights when Grace sang lullabies, her warm voice calming every fear. Grace had lived for her, but also for the belief in forgiveness. Aisha looked out the window at the twinkling lights of Atlanta. William wasn't the father she had dreamed of. He had chosen power over Grace, leaving her mother to struggle silently. But he kept her photo, wore the silver ring, and lived with his guilt. Grace's letter and journal made it clear she wanted Aisha to have the choice she never had. Aisha touched her neck where the necklace once hung, and remembered William's words. I want to try, to honor Grace. Part of her wanted to turn away and close the door on the past, just as Grace once had. Though difficult, her life had been whole with her mother's love. But another part of her, small, yet persistent, wondered if she gave William a chance. Could she find something her mother had always hoped for, a new beginning? Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, as Grace had written. It meant freedom. Aisha stood, wiped her tears, and slipped the journal into her bag. She had decided to meet William again, not to accept him right away, but to lay a foundation. She needed to see that he felt regret and understood the magnitude of what Grace had sacrificed. She looked at her mother's photo, her gentle smile seeming to offer encouragement. Mom, I'll do this for you, she whispered, and for me. She stepped out the door, the bright lights of Atlanta shining ahead. Harris Enterprises awaited her, but Aisha wouldn't confront the past. This time she would find her final answer to discover where her heart would lead. Aisha Thompson stood in front of the glass tower of Harris Enterprises, her mother Grace Thompson's final journal resting heavily in her hands. After uncovering that William Harris, a powerful white billionaire, was her father, and reading Grace's message about forgiveness, Aisha faced a life-defining decision: to accept William as her father, or close the door on the past to honor her mother's sacrifice. In their final meeting, she left the journal with William, a symbol of her choice, reflecting the message, forgive, love, begin. Would Aisha open her heart to a new beginning, or choose the independent path Grace had taught her? Her story lingers as a testament to the power of love and the freedom it brings. Dawn broke over the Atlanta skyline, casting golden light over the towering buildings. Aisha Thompson stood outside Harris Enterprises, Grace's thin journal in hand, her heart pounding yet calm. Her mother's letter and journal had confirmed that William Harris was her father, the man who once loved Grace, but had been torn apart from her by racial prejudice and family pressure in the 1980s. Grace's final message, forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's setting yourself free, had led Aisha here not to accuse, but to make her final choice. She was no longer the angry girl from South Atlanta's poor neighborhoods. She was Grace's daughter, carrying her mother's love and strength. Aisha stepped into the grand lobby. The cold marble floors and stark white lights no longer shook her resolve. At the reception desk, she spoke clearly. Aisha Thompson. William Harris is expecting me. The receptionist, recognizing the name, made a quick call. Top floor, she said. In the elevator, Aisha touched the journal, feeling the imprint of Grace's handwriting like an encouraging whisper. She didn't know exactly what she would say, but she knew she had to do this for her mother and herself. The elevator doors opened. William stood at the office entrance, tall in a gray suit. His blue eyes were no longer cold, but full of hope and fear. "Aisha," he said, his voice low, gesturing to her inside. The office was vast with windows overlooking a glowing Atlanta, but on the desk, the silver necklace engraved with "Forgive, Love, Begin," and Grace's photograph rested quietly, witnesses to the past. William's eyes trembled slightly when he saw the journal in her hands. "What did you find?" he asked, his voice hushed. Aisha placed the journal on the desk and opened it to the final page. "My mother wrote this before she died," she said, her voice steady but soft. "She said she didn't hate you, that you loved her. She wanted me to forgive not just you, but to free myself." She paused, meeting his gaze. "I know you're my father. I know you tried to find her, and that you've lived with the guilt of leaving her. But I need to know, if I give you a chance, what will you do to honor my mother?" William touched the journal, his fingers brushing the slanted script. "I lost Grace because I was a coward," he said, voice shaking. "My family called her unworthy, but she was the strongest woman I've ever known. I kept her photo, this ring, because they remind me of what I failed to do. If you give me a chance, Aisha, I want to learn how to be your father, not to make up for the past, but to live the way Grace would have wanted, with love, not bitterness." Aisha's chest tightened. She remembered Grace's lullabies and laughter, despite calloused hands from the sewing shop. Grace had sacrificed love to protect her from the Harris family and a society that wouldn't accept a mixed-race child. But Grace also believed in forgiveness. Aisha looked at William not as a powerful billionaire, but as a man burdened by 30 years of guilt. She saw her mother in him, the strength, the love, and the pain. "I can't call you Dad yet," she said, trembling, "but I want to try, not today, but step by step. Because Mom wanted us to begin again." William nodded, eyes misty. "I'll wait, Aisha, as long as it takes." Aisha pushed the journal toward him. "Keep it," she said. "She wrote it for both of us." She stood up, heading to the door, but this time without rushing. She turned back and looked at him one last time. "Don't let her down," she said, leaving the morning light blazing through the elevator windows. As the elevator doors closed, Aisha felt a weight lift, like she'd set something free. She hadn't completely forgiven, but she had made a choice. Not to shut the past away, but to open a small door, just as Grace had wished. She touched her neck where the necklace once hung and smiled. "Mom, I did it," she whispered. Atlanta stretched out before her, full of promise. Aisha's story didn't end here. It was a new beginning, carrying the love of Grace and the power of forgiveness. Aisha's story is proof that the past doesn't define the future. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's choosing to love and begin again. What do you think Aisha should do next? Should she build a relationship with William, or continue the independent path Grace taught her? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you love this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next emotional journey. Thank you for joining us, and see you in the following story.